All right, I will say good morning. Let us begin. I want to begin by thanking our sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tishrei, Steve and Terry Zinn, in memory of their parents, Tzvi Hirsch ben Yosef HaKohen, Yentel Mindel Bas David Halevi, Bunim Tzvi ben Chaim, Devora Bas Yisrael Yoel. And to thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Zev and Isabel Greiner, in memory of Isabel's father, David Levine, David ben Yitzchak Eli Halevi. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshamas will have an Aliyah and the families a Nechama. And above with that, let us begin. So today's daf is Mem Daled 44, and we are picking up on the bottom of Mem Gimel Amud Beis 43b, picking up approximately 8 lines up from the bottom, actually 9 lines up from the bottom. Last word on the line, Nehemiah. Nehemiah B'rei Dav Chanilai. Both a fascinating case. So Nehemiah, the son of Rabbi Chanilai, Meshachte Shmaisa, V'nafak Chutz L'tchum, was engrossed in his learning, and as a result, exited the Tchum. So let's remember again, we actually made reference to this in last week's daf. The Gemara spoke about the idea that sometimes a person could wander out of the Tchum. Remember again, the Gemara said a person is a Talmud Chacham. It could be as a result of his learning. And if a person is an Am Ha'aretz, it could be a result of his looking for his donkey. So again, over here, the Gemara talks about this individual, Nehemiah, the son of Rabbi Chanilai, who became so engrossed in his learning that he ended up walking out of the Tchum. Amar le Rav Chisda Rav Nachman. So Rav Chisda said to Rav Nachman, Nehemiah tamidcha sharoi bitzar. Nehemiah, your student, apparently Nehemiah was a Talmud, was a student of Rav Nachman. So Rav Chisda says to Rav Nachman, Nehemiah, your student, is in a difficult predicament. Because let's remember again, what's the halacha? If you exit your tchum, you are limited to Dalit Amas. So because you're limited to Dalit Amas, ultimately again, he's Sharai B'tzar. Amarlo. So Rav Nachman came up with an interesting idea. Amarlo, Aselo Mechitza Shel B'nei Adam. Make for him a partition made of people, or create a human mechitza. And if you create a human mechitza, that creates an enclosure. The enclosure then will allow him to come back into his tchum. So let's analyze this. So Yosef Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Achuri de Rava, Yosef Rava Kameid Rav Nachman. So we'll say, so Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak was sitting behind Rava, and Rava was sitting before Rav Nachman. Amalei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Rava, my kami baile the Rav Chisda. So what is it exactly that Rav Chisda was bothered about? And Rav say, obviously, so remember, let's just be clear on the story. So Nehemiah wanders out of the Tchum. Rav Chisda comes to Rav Nachman and says, Rav Nachman, Nehemiah, your student, is in trouble. Rav Nachman says, no problem, make for him a partition of people, and that will allow him ultimately again to go ahead and come back into the Tchum. So Rav Chisda, what was his question? In other words, if this indeed was an Eitzah, why couldn't Rav Chisda come up with this himself? So at the end of the day, the Gemara says, my kind by the Rav Chisda, b'demalu gavre askinon. So I'll say, if you're asking about the following question, look at Rashi, b'demalu gavre, shaylo anoshim harbe sheyecholon latzei schutz l'tchum, kigon she'ervu lasos lo mechitza mikan. So we'll say, if we're talking about a situation where there were in fact enough people present to be able to make a human mechitza from the place where Nehemiah was situated back into his previous tchum. So if that's and he was asking, top of Mem Daled, and perhaps his shaila was, does the halacha follow Rabbi Gamliel or not? So we'll say, what does that mean? Remember again, back in our Mishnah, Rabbi Gamliel was of the opinion that halacha l'maisa, if you leave your tchum and are placed in an enclosed area, that enclosed area becomes like your Daled Amas, right? Remember again, this was Rabbi Gamliel's case where a person was taken out by Nachrim, out of his tchum, placed into an enclosure. Rabbi Gamliel said that entire enclosure, no matter how large it is treated like his Daled Amas. So we'll say, so remember, so what was Rav Chisda's issue? Rav Chisda's question was, does the halacha follow Rabbi Gamliel or not? In other words, that we have enough people to do this. We have enough people. The shaila is, does it work or not? Does the halacha follow Rav Chisda or not? O Dilma, or the other possibility is, bidelo malu gavri askinon. Or else maybe the other possibility is as follows. Maybe they didn't actually have enough people in order to create a human mechitza to get Nehemiah back into his tchum. And what was the question? The kamibayli halacha krabi Eliezer o ein halacha krabi Eliezer. So we'll say this is actually fascinating. If you look at the top Rashi on Mem Daled Amadalef, Rashi says the kamibayli halacha krabi Eliezer the Amar b'masnisin mi sheyatza chutz letchum shtei amos yikonis. So we'll say this is actually quite interesting. Rabbi Eliezer, we're going to see this later on, but Rabbi Eliezer has an opinion that if you are within 2 amos of your tchum, you are permitted to enter even without a mechitza. So that's really quite fascinating. So now again, let's say my partitions end 2 amos before my tchum. I'm allowed to go ahead and walk those 2 amos even though there are no partitions. Why he holds that way, where that svara comes from, we'll see when we get to that sugya. So we'll say maybe that was Rav Chisda's issue. Maybe there were enough people to get Nehemiah up until 2 amos of his tchum, but then there was going to be 2 amos of open space. And maybe what Rabbi Eliezer was questioning, maybe what Rav Chisda was questioning was, do we hold like Rabbi Elazar or not? So we'll say, so again, so just to review the facts, Nehemiah wanders out of his tchum. He was engrossed in his learning, wanders out his tchum. He is therefore confined to Daled Amos. Rav Chisda comes to Rav Nachman, and he says to Rav Nachman, we got to help out your Talmud Nehemiah. Rav Nachman says, no problem, just make a human mechitza. Just make a human mechitza, and that's all. And that will allow him ultimately again to come back in. So the Gemara is asking, okay, Rav Chisda could have also come up with this eitzah on his own. So Rav Chisda obviously was bothered by something. What was he bothered by? Possibility A, do we pass like Rabbi Gamliel or not? In other words, very nice if you create a human mechitza, that only works if you pass like Rabbi Gamliel, that an enclosed area is considered to be like Daled Amos. So was that his shaila? Do we pass like Rabbi Gamliel or not? Or perhaps it was a situation where there weren't enough people, and therefore there were 2 amos of space between the end of the human mechitza and the tchum. And maybe his question was, do we pass like Rabbi Elazar, who allows you who allows you to walk 2 amos without a mechitza in order to get back into your tchum? So pshita, the Gemara said, Mem Daled Amadalef, 3 lines down. So pshita bidelo malu gavri askinon. We're definitely talking about a case where there weren't enough people to create a complete human mechitza. The isaka daitcha bidemalu gavri askinon. For Rabbi say, if you assume that halacha l'maisa, we're talking about a situation where there were enough people. Mighty boile. Then Rabbi say, there's no shaila why. The Gemara says, ha'amarav halacha k'mgamliel bedir v'sahar usfina. But so we already established in yesterday's daf that halacha l'maisa, the halacha follows Rabbi Gamliel in the case of a boat, a pen, or a corral. Rabbi says, we've established in yesterday's daf that halacha l'maisa, whenever you have an enclosure, whenever a person is placed in an enclosure, even outside of his tchum, that entire enclosure is treated like Daled Amos. So that could not have been Rav Chisda's shaila. Ela vaday bidelo malu gavri askinon, vid Rabbi Eliezer kami barile. Rather, what happened, Rabbi Osai? The case over here is where there were not enough people to form the human chain, or to form the human mechitzas. And therefore, again, Rav Chisda's shaila was about whether or not to pass like Rabbi Eliezer. In other words, that if I have 2 amos of open space, will that allow the individual to walk into his tchum? To which the Gemara says, Dekanami diktani. Dekanami, you can infer this as well. Deka amar lei yikanes. Ultimately, again, because it was when Rav Nachman responded, he said, let him enter. My yikanes, what does it mean, let him enter? Below mechitza. So also you see from the fact that Rav Nachman responded to Rav Chisda and said, make the human chain, make the human mechitzas, and ultimately again, where those mechitzas and yikanes, Nehemiah will be permitted to go ahead and enter into his tchum. So from here you see that halacha l'maisa, the question that Rav Chisda had was, we have enough people to make a mechitza, but the mechitza doesn't extend all the way back into Nehemiah's tchum. It only goes approximately up to 2 amos within his tchum. Okay, but 2 amos at least is in the shita of Rabbi Eliezer. Do we paskin like Rabbi Eliezer or not? To which Rav Nachman responded, yes, we paskin like Rabbi Eliezer, and therefore halacha l'maisa, as long as the human mechitza ends within 2 amas of Nehemiah's original tchum, Nehemiah could enter in. Eisir Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak l'Rava. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak raised the kasha to Rava. Nafal dofna lo yamid ba adam behema v'kelim v'lo yiskav esamito lifros sudden. This is an incredible case. So listen to this situation. We're talking about sukkah. Incredible. We had Rosh Hashanah Gemaras before Rosh Hashanah. Now we're going to have some sukkah Gemaras before sukkah. So listen to this case. Person has a wall of their sukkah, and the wall fell down. Nafal dofna. Wall fell down. So the Gemara says, what can't you do? Lo yamid ba adam behema v'kelim. So you can't go ahead and we'll say and place a person. So I need a wall. So I say to my friend Reuven, hey Reuven, stand there. Right? Stand there. So I can't go ahead and make a person. I can't put a person there to be a wall, or for that matter, an animal to be a wall, or kelim, or utensils. Nor could I go ahead and take a bed and let's say stand the bed up, put a sheet over the bed, thereby making that into a wall. Why not? Why can't I do any of this? So we'll say very simple cheshbon, because you are not permitted to go to make a temporary structure on Yom Tiv, and all the more so you cannot go ahead and do so on Shabbos. So we'll say, take a look at Rashi. V'lo yiskof es hamita, lo b'sukkah keneged appeared. So va'afa gavlo mechse kebinyin, d'dome kimiskavin lehafnos lo makom hasukkah, afilu hochi aser, v'karshu lahanach d'shar lasos mechitza shal b'nei adam b'Shabbos. So let's listen to this. Rashi is pointing out the bed case is actually even a bigger novelty. Why? Because I would have thought, I understand if you tell me I can't use a person, can't use a behema, can't use utensils. The bed, I would have thought, looks like I'm not really erecting a wall. Rather, what am I doing? I need to clean the sukkah. I need to clean the area. So I'm just standing up the bed to clean the area. But even that, you're not allowed to do. They will say, so what do you see from here? You see from here that halacha l'maisa, on Yom Tiv and on Shabbos, you are not permitted to erect any type of temporary structure. Well, one second, if that's the case, then how did Rav Nachman allow for the creation of a human mechitza? Isn't the creation of a human mechitza by definition creating a temporary structure on Shabbos? And yet Rav Nachman allowed that in order to get Nehemiah back into his tchum. Amar lei at amrit limiha. So ultimately again, so Rava said to Rav Nachman, Yitzchak, you're bringing me from this brisa, va'ana amina lachameha. I'll bring you from another brisa. You think you have a brisa, I have a brisa also. What's my brisa? Osa adam es chavero dofen, kadesh yochal v'yishta v'yashen. A person could utilize his friend as a wall, in order that he could eat in his sukkah, drink in his sukkah, sleep in his sukkah. And furthermore, you can go ahead and stand up a bed in order that the bed should serve as a mechitza, both to serve as a wall for your sukkah, but also, if there's a dead person and you don't want the sun to shine on the dead person, you could go ahead and stand up the bed to block out the sun, or to go ahead and prevent the sun from shining on food so that the sun shouldn't spoil the food. So now we have mamish a contradictory brises. One brisa says that you can make a wall out of people, out of behemoths, out of a bed. The first brisa said you're not allowed to do any of this. So which one is it? So the kasha, it's not a contradiction. Rabbi Eliezer, Haraban. Rabbi says, interestingly enough, two different opinions. Because we've actually had this before in Shabbos. Disnan, because we learned in the Mishnah Masechah Shabbos, Pekak HaCholon. So we'll say Pekak HaCholon is a window shutter, right? A window shutter. But remember again, as opposed to the shutters you think about on our windows today, where there's like a hinge that keeps the shutter there. Their shutters were not like that. Their shutters were independent pieces of wood that ultimately were put into the bus. Remember again, why did they have it like that? They could have also used hinges. Because remember again, the Gemara spoke about this. Rashi explained that merchants would often use those shutters as tables to display their wares, right? So in the evening when your store was closed, you would use it to close up the doorway, close up the window. But during the day, you would use it as just a flat surface to show your wares. So the Gemara says, Pekaka cholon, a window shutter. Rabbi Eliezer, Omer Bisman, Shekasher, Vitali, Pokikin Bo. So Rabbi Eliezer says, as long as the window shutter is tied and suspended, right? Two things. It has to be tied to the structure and suspended, so it doesn't rest on the ground. What's the halacha? Pokikin Bo. then you could put it in and take it out of the structure. There's no problem. That's not called bona, that's not called building if the item is attached and suspended. However, ve'imlav in pokikin, I will say if the shutter is not both attached and suspended, then einachinami, you are not permitted to go ahead and take it out and put it back. Look at Rashi. Rashi says imlav in pokikin, both according to Rabbi Eliezer. If the shutter is not tied and suspended, you can't use it. Rashi says the dummy labona, because I will say ultimately again, because to take just the shutter off the ground that is not both attached and suspended has the appearance of building. Shemosif al stimas habayis, for you are adding on to the structure of the home or of the enclosure of the home. And even though, again, remember this, let's be clear, the placement of this shutter is obviously temporary, right? That's the chap of the shutter. It's made to be put in and taken out. Nevertheless, Rabbi Eliezer holds that constructing something arai, even constructing something temporary, on Shabbos or Yom Tov will be aser. The Chum say no, benkach ubenkach polkakinbo. The Chum say no problem. Whether the shutter is tied, not tied, suspended, it doesn't make a difference. You could put it in, you could take it out. Why? What's their logic? Their logic seems to be that halacha lamaisa, they find no problem with a binyan arai, no problem with temporary structure, temporary building. Sefer Abosai, the Gemara wants to suggest the two brisos aren't contradictory. They just reflect two different opinions. So the opinion that said that you cannot use your friend or your behema or your kli or your bed to go ahead and replace the wall that has fallen down in your sukkah, Salach Lamaisa, that's the view of the Chachamim, who hold that a binyan arai is aser on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Temporary building, temporary structure is aser. The brisa that says that you can do this reflects the view of the Chachamim, who hold that a temporary structure is not problematic on Shabbos and Yom Tov. But one second, we qualified this statement in the following way. What did we say? Remember, we clarified this machlokes. Everyone, both the Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer agree that you cannot construct a temporary structure on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Lo nechluku ela lahosif. The only machlokes we will say is, can you add on to an already existing structure? Rabbi Eliezer Omer ein mosif b'yom tov ein tzarich b'Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer holds you cannot add on to an already existing structure on Yom Tov, all the more so on Shabbos. V'chachamim Omer mosifin b'Shabbos ein tzarich b'yom tov. The Chachamim say no, you can go ahead and add on to a temporary structure on Shabbos or on Yom Tov, and all the more so on Shabbos. Sefer Abosai, it would appear, going back for just a moment, neither Rabbi Eliezer nor the Chachamim would allow you to actually put up a wall in your sukkah. Because the act of putting up in the wall your sukkah, Abosai, is what? Is constructing an ohel arai. And even the Chachamim, who have a more permissive stance, only allow you to add on something to an already existing structure. So for example, I have a structure, the Chacham will say, fine, you can put the shutter in. You can put the shutter in. That's fine. But to actually create an ohel arai, that you can't do. Creating a wall, Abosai, is mamish not just adding on to a structure. Creating a wall is creating the structure. So therefore, B'Pashtus, even the Chachamim, who have a more permissive view by the shutter, would not allow. If that's the case, we're still back to our original question: how do we reconcile the brises? Elul Kasha, Hakra Meir, Hakra Rabbi Yehuda. Both rather two different opinions. One is like Rabbi Meir, one is like Rabbi Yehuda. What does this mean? Disanya, here we go. Asa lebehema dofen l'sukkah. If you made your animal into a wall for your sukkah, Rabbi Meir posel, Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Rabbi Meir says it is posel, and Rabbi Yehuda says it's kosher. Now, take a look at Rashi. Rabbi Meir posel, mefarshim mesecha sukkah shema tivrach. Because I will say, ultimately, again, Rabbi Meir has a very practical issue. This has nothing to do with bone and nothing to do with anything, but rather what? You cannot use an animal for your wall in the sukkah, very simply, because the animal may run away. And if the animal runs away, of course, again, then my sukkah is compromised. Rabbi Yehuda says it's kosher. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, halacha l'maisa, you're permitted to use an animal. To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Meir de kapasa hasam, amalav mechitzis. You're supposed to, therefore, Rabbi Meir holds that if you use an animal as a wall for your sukkah, it's possible, which tells you what? That an animal is not fit for a wall for a sukkah. Therefore, I will say, meaning an animal does not serve as a mechitza. So if the animal doesn't serve as a mechitza, hacha shari. So therefore, I will say, this is actually an interesting idea. So therefore, when the Brisa says that if your wall fell down, you could put an animal there, actually reflects the view of Rabbi Meir. So what does it mean you could put an animal there? So what it sounds like the Gemara is saying is you could put an animal there, not that your sukkah is kosher, but that the act of placing an animal there is a meaningless act. That is not a valid mechitza. So because it's not a valid mechitza, again, according to Rabbi Meir, because the animal may run away, therefore the act of putting an animal in the breach of a sukkah on Yom Tiv is a meaningless act. Therefore, technically speaking, it's mutter. So the Gemara says, the Rabbi Meir, the Kapasal Hasam Amala Mechitzi. So Rabbi Meir ultimately again who says that an animal is a pasal mechitza. Hacha, in the case where the wall fell down, you want to replace it with an animal. Shari, you could put an animal there. Delav midi ka'avid. Because your act is absolutely meaningless. That is not an act of binyan. Rabbi Huda the Kamach Shir Hasam, but Rabbi Huda says that you can use an animal as a mechitza, as a wall in your sukkah. Alma mechitzihi. Therefore, again, an animal is a proper mechitza. Hacha aser. And therefore, I will say, if one of the walls falls down, you will be prohibited to replace it with an animal. Okay, so the Gemara says, but I don't understand. Eimer d'sham Rabbi Meir behema. So we'll say, fine. I understand that according to Rabbi Meir, therefore, the act of replacing the breached wall in the sukkah with a behema is a meaningless act. But I will say, but halacha l'maisa, the Brisa doesn't just talk about behema. The Brisa groups together behema, adam, kalim. So the Gemara says, adam v'kalim misham mislei. The Brisa say, what about adam and kalim? Because remember again, the way the Brisa reads is one Brisa says, if the wall of the sukkah falls down, you can replace it with behema, adam, kalim. So now we wanted to say that Brisa reflects the view of Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir holds that a behema is not a bona fide wall of a sukkah. Therefore, if the wall falls down, you place a behema there. Technically, it's mutter because you haven't done anything of significance. But that means Rabbi Meir is going to permit you to go ahead and put an adam or kalim there. So when it's the su, Rabbi Meir ali would demand. Furthermore, I'll say, whose opinion does Rabbi Meir go ahead and reflect? To which the Gemara says, whose opinion does Rabbi Meir reflect? The Gemara says, I ali would Rabbi Eliezer lahosif nami aser. So we'll say, if he was like Rabbi Eliezer, then even to add on to an existing structure should be problematic. Ella aliba d'Rabbanon, but rather he must hold like d'Rabbanon. To which the Gemara says, Eimer d'Amri Rabbanon lahosif lechatchila mi Amr. Even the Rabbanon say only allow you to add on to an already existing structure. But would the Rabbanon actually allow you to build something new? And also remember again, the Brisa in question says that if the wall falls down, you could replace it with Adam, behema, and kalim, which is not just adding on to an existing oil, but it's considered to be an act of binyan. To which the Gemara says it's not a contradiction. Lo kashya, ha bidofen shlishi, ha bidofen revius. I will say the two different brises are talking about two different sukkahs. One brise is talking about where the third wall of the sukkah fell down. One brise is talking about where the fourth wall of the sukkah fell down. What's an afkamir? We'll say, look at Rashi, just one bidofen shlishis. The b'shtei defanos in karei ohel, because remember a sukkah is not a sukkah with two walls. V'chi avid badofen shlishis mashvile ohel, and therefore I will say again, in one brayso we're talking about where the sukkah had three walls. One of the walls fell down. I will say, what is a two-walled sukkah? What is a two-walled sukkah? Nothing. It's nothing. It's nothing. We'll say that's not even called the. It's nothing. It's nothing. Therefore, if you have a two-walled sukkah and you were to go ahead and repair or create a third wall, we'll say, that's not called adding onto an oil arai. What is that called? The creation of a brand new structure. Umodu rabbanan de'ein osin oil arai betchila. I'm reading Rashi. V'haditani. You're supposed to listen to this. So therefore, the brisa that says that if the wall falls down, you cannot replace it with anything. That's talking about a wall, a sukkah that originally had three walls. Now one of the walls fell down. It's a two-walled sukkah. Two-walled sukkah is not a sukkah. Therefore, I will say everyone agrees that in that case, you cannot go ahead and build that third wall because that is called the creation of an oil arai. And even the chachamim, who are mekel in the case of the window shutter, are only mekel in that case. Why? Because you are adding on to a temporary structure. But halacha l'maisa, to create a new structure, even the chachamim would say that is asar. But look at Rashi, v'hadatani mutar. But the brisa that says that if the wall of the sukkah fell down, you are permitted to replace it. Bedofen revius. That's talking about the fourth wall. Debalav havi ohel. Because just remember again, if you have a 4-walled sukkah and one of the walls fell down, what's the ramification of the breach of that 4th wall? In reality, nothing. A sukkah only has to have 3 walls. So therefore, we'll say that's the price that says if your 4th wall falls down, okay, you could repair it. Why? Because we'll say that reflects the view of the Chachamim, namely that halacha l'maisa you could add on to an ohel arai on Yom Tov and on Shabbos. So therefore, again, I'm sorry. Good. So the Gemara says, "Dekanami diktani." The truth is, this reading is supported by the Braisos themselves. Diktani nafal dofna. Because we'll see if you look at the lashon ultimately again is what fell down. What fell down? Its wall. So we'll say it doesn't just say nafal dofen. It says nafal dofna. Dofna, Rabosai means it's almost like I don't know what to write. It's not just any wall, but it's the wall. What's the wall? The wall is the 3rd wall of the sukkah, the wall that makes the sukkah the sukkah. Shema mina. So Rabosai says, therefore again, that's the reconciliation of the Braises. So Braisa number 1 is talking about a situation where halacha l'maisa, the 3rd wall fell down. If the 3rd wall fell down, everyone agrees you can't repair it. Because halacha l'maisa, that's constructing an ohel arai on Yom Tov / Shabbos, and everybody agrees that it's asur. But the Braisa that says that you can repair it, that's talking about where the 4th wall fell down. And it reflects the view of the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan hold that you could add on to a temporary structure on Shabbos, or as certainly Yom Tov, as you saw in the case of the window shutter. Shema mina. Elo, the Gemara says, Amud Beis, Elo, Adam Adam Kasha. But I will say, again, what do we do with the Adam Adam? So I'll say, so remember again, what do I do with the fact that one Braisa? So remember, let's take a step back. How do we get into this? Nehemiah started this whole mess. Right? Nehemiah got engrossed in his learning, wandered out of the Tchum. So remember again, Rav Chisda comes to Rav Nachman. What do? Rav Nachman says, go ahead and create the human structure, the human mechitzas from and get him back. So I'll say, what do I do with that? Right? In other words, I still have a brisa that says that you're not allowed to do that. So I'll say, let's take a step back. So the way we just explained is, when can't you use people for a structure? Let's go back for a second. When can't you use people for a wall in your sukkah? When the people themselves actually create the mechitza. So if you were to have a sukkah of 3 walls and one of the walls falls down, you cannot say, hey, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, do me a favor, guys, just stand here for 7 days. Right? Just do me a favor and stand here. No, I just need them until Chalamayit. Right? Just go ahead and stand here for a little bit or just for my meal. So I could go ahead and have my su'udah. So he said that when those individuals mamish create the structure, you're not allowed to do that because everyone agrees that you cannot create an ohel arai. But one second, let's just take a step back. We'll say what Rav Chisda, what Rav Nachman was suggesting. He's suggesting let people make human partitions. They are actively creating a structure on Shabbos. So how is that permitted? That's Adam Kasha. How is that permitted? To which the Gemara will say, this is incredible. Adam Nami Lo Kasha, Kan Ledas, Kan Shelo Ledas, Kan Shelo Medas. So we'll say, this is incredible. One is talking about a case where the people know that they're serving as a mechitza. One is in a case where people don't know that they're serving as a mechitza. Look at Rashi. It's the last of the wide lines in Rashi. La Da'as, Rashi says, Sha'omit Sham Yodea, Shalashem Mechitza Ha'emidu Sham Aser. I will say, if it is clear and known that I am being used as a mechitza, that is aser. That is aser. But shalol ledas, Rashi says, mutar demishum asiyas ohel lekal meimar de'in derech binyan bekach avakli derech binyan bekach hu hilchach tov shlish aser. Listen to this. So this is fascinating. Remember, it's a fascinating distinction. Since it's not normal to build mechitzas out of people, so when is it problematic? When a person knows that they're being used as a mechitza. But if I don't know that I'm being used as a mechitza, then what? Then halacha l'maisa, it's permitted. So therefore, what the Gemara wants to suggest is as follows: V'had Rabbi Nechemia breid Rabbi Chaniloi ledas hava. But 1 second. So we'll say, the way I would understand is therefore when the Brisa says that you can't use people as a mechitza, that's when people know about it. The case of Rabbi Nechemia ultimately, again, must have been a case of shalom midas, where the people didn't know they were being used as a mechitza. So we'll say, but that's not true. Or we'll say, remember again, what was happening in that case? So remember again, Rav Nachman was telling Rav Chisda to go gather a bunch of chevra. So they must have known what they were being used for. To which the Gemara says, no, shalom midas, no, they didn't know. They did not know. But say, interesting din in human nature is that sometimes people don't ask questions. Stand here, okay, right? Just stand here, right? So it's not everybody is inquisitive. Not everybody asks questions. Sometimes people just do as they're told. Shlomi das hava. So the Gemara says, "I but Rav Chisda miha das hava." Rabbi say ultimately again, but I don't understand. Rav Chisda, remember again, Rabbi say Rav Chisda was the one who came to Rav Nachman and said, "We have a problem. Nehemiah wandered out of the tchum." So then Rav Nachman says to Rav Chisda, "Gather a chevra, make human partitions, and get everybody back in." Presumably, Rav Chisda was part of this chevra, and Rav Chisda did know what was going on. To which the Gemara says, "Rav Chisda shalom min minyan hava." Rav Chisda was not part of the chevra. He gathered the people. Apparently, did not tell them ultimately again what he wanted them for. But halacha l'maisa, he was not part of the minyan. So we'll say what comes out of here is something really amazing. So first of all, there's some fascinating halachas in Sukkah, right? It appears that the conclusion of the Gemara is that we paskin like the Chachamim. Namely, you could add on to a temporary structure on Yom Tiv or Shabbos. You could add on. What you can't do is construct a temporary structure on Shabbos or Yom Tov. That's even according to the Chachamim. Right? Even the Chachamim will allow you to shutter the window, will not allow you to put up the third wall of the sukkah. What also emerges in Rabbi is an incredible yisod that apparently you can make mechitzas out of people. You can make mechitzas out of people, which can be incredibly helpful if you end up wandering outside of your tchum. The mechitzas out of people could allow you to get back into your tchum. But apparently the only way to utilize people as tchum, as mechitzas, is if they don't know what they are being used for. If they know, then halacha l'maaseh will say that's problematic. Why? Because again, then it has the appearance of active participation in the creation of a structure. If they don't know, then since this is not the normal derech of binyan, it's not the normal way that you go ahead and you build, therefore halacha l'maaseh there's no issue of building on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So we'll say, watch this. Hano beginana ta'ile b'may b'mechitza shal b'nei adam. There were these individuals, farmers, who used to go ahead and bring in water through a mechitza of people. So we'll say they would utilize this on Shabbos. What they would do is they would have a well. They had no eruv, right, or anything, no enclosure. So what they did is they enclosed the well with a human partition all the way to where they wanted to bring the water. They did this on Shabbos. Nagdinhu Shmuel. Shmuel flogged them for this because they felt that they were violating Shabbos. Amar, because he said, Im Amur Shalomidas, Yomur Ladas, because Shmuel said, remember, you could only utilize human partition if what? If the people involved don't know that they are human partitions. But in this case, apparently, again, they did know that they were being utilized as mechitzas. Therefore, Shmuel flogged them. Hano ziki, davishajin beristika dimechuza. So we'll say there were these ziki. Rashi says, what are ziki? They're wineskins. Wineskins. So we'll say, so Rashi says, no dos v'shal Rava haba. They were wineskins that belonged to Rava. And somehow they were forgotten in the public area of Mechuzah. Okay, so what happens now? This is Shabbos. Bahadi da asira mepirke alinu nehili. So let's listen to this. So what happens? So it's Shabbos. Somebody forgot Rava's wineskins in the public area on Shabbos. So what happened? Rava gave shira on Shabbos. He's coming back. So what happened? Rava is the Rebbe, or he's the Rebbe. So what happens? As he's walking back, he's surrounded by his Talmidim. Oh, so what did his Shabbos do? His attendant went ahead and what Bosai picked up the wineskins. Givaldik. I have a human partition. And remember, in this case, the people were not actively serving as human partitions. Why not? Because remember, again, halacha l'maisa, they were just following him back from shir. So this is totally permitted. This is shalom midas. The Shabbos achrisi bayalinu. So apparently it's happened the next Shabbos as well. And Rava's Shabbos again wanted to bring back the wineskins. Va'asar lahu. Ultimately, Rava says, no, you can't do it again this week. Dahavile kiladas va'asar. Because they'll say, once you do it once, and kind of people saw what happened, the concern was then the following week, it would have the status of ladas, that they would be doing it, that they would realize that they're being used as partitions. So the Gemara says, Levi a'ilu beitivna, Levi would have straw brought in through human partitions. Ze'iri aspasta, we'll say aspasta was animal feed. He would have animal feed brought in. Sim barchia mayr. Sim barchia would have water brought in through these human partitions. So we'll say, how do we paskin halacha l'maisa? So this is really quite incredible. So the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Taf Hey, in Siman Tafei Halacha Dalet says as follows: Mi sheyatza chutz l'tchum shelo l'das. If somebody wandered out of their tchum unintentionally, this is an unintentional case. Mutar lasos lo mechitza shel bnei adam she'arvu la'oso ruach v'yecholim leilech sham v'yasu sevivav kimo mechitza v'kanes peinehem. Both say if someone inadvertently wanders out of his tchum, the way to get him back into his tchum is by making human partitions who create an enclosure and allow him to get back into his tchum, with a very important qualification. V'hu shelo yedu osam shenasis b'ma mechitza shelashem kach nikru. But it only works if the people involved do not know that they are being utilized as mechitzas. Aval im yatsa ladas, but halacha l'maisa, if a person intentionally left his tchum, then ultimately, again, this does not work. So we'll say, so two qualifications. Number one, you could use people as a human mechitza, but it only works if they don't know that they're being used as a mechitza. Number two, it only works for someone who wanders out inadvertently. Someone who intentionally leaves the tchum cannot go ahead and utilize this ability. Now, whether or not we pasuk Rabbi Eliezer about the 2 amma gap, that Emir Tashem will see. So it's really quite a fascinating halacha. Good, says the Mishnah. Mishi Yatza B'Rishos. So we'll say another fascinating, really riveting sugya. Mishi Yatza B'Rishos. So we'll say this is talking about someone who left his tchum with permission. So you say to yourself, 1 second, how can you ever have a case of someone leaving his tchum with permission? So look at Rashi. Mishi Yatza B'Rishos. Ki gon le'idos hachodesh, o lahatzil min hagayis, u min hanar, o chachma ba'alei. It's very simple. So let's say I have someone who's going to see the new moon, right? Mishnah Rosh Hashanah says if you see the new moon, you have to give testimony in front of the high court in Yerushalayim. You are permitted to travel even on Shabbos. So that's someone who leaves his tchum for Rishos, or a midwife, Rashi explains, or I hear that someone is in danger and I want to go out to save them. Those are all cases where halacha l'maisa, I am permitted to leave my tchum on Shabbos. But what happened? Va'amru lo kavar nasa ma'isa. So let's say, so now what happens? I'm leaving my tchum to go ahead and give testimony about the new moon. And as I'm traveling, what do I hear? My chaver tells me, oh, Baruch Hashem, Reuven and Shimon already got to Yerushalayim. They declared the new month, a guten chodesh. Okay, fantastic. The only problem is what? I'm on my way. I'm now outside of my tchum. So what do I do now? So the Gemara says, Yesh la'apayim amalu chol ruach. Ultimately, again, it's not a problem because they just have a brand new tchum. I have a tchum from wherever. So wherever I hear that news, it sounds wherever I hear that news, I have a tchum 2,000 amas in any direction from. So the place where I hear the news becomes like my new makom shvisa, and I have a 2,000 amas in every direction from there. The Gemara says, furthermore, im hayabesocha tchum kilo lo yatsa. This is very interesting. Furthermore, if my new tchum overlaps with my old tchum, it allows me to go back to my old tchum as if I never left. Which says another way of saying that if I traveled, but I traveled less than 2,000 amas from my original tchum. So now again, I have a new tchum that goes 2,000 amas in any direction, but in one direction it overlaps with my old tchum. If I want to resume my old tchum, I could do that as well. So the Gemara says, furthermore, anyone who goes out to save someone, again, we'll see exactly what this means, has the right to go back to his tchum on Shabbos. We'll see what that means. So the Gemara says, so what does it mean when it says that halacha l'maisa? So remember again, I'm on my way to give Eidos HaChodesh. I hear that the Beis Din has already accepted Eidos. So now I get 2,000 amas in any direction. So the Gemara says, but if it overlaps with your old tchum, it's as if you never left. What does that mean? Amar Rabba, Hachi Kamar, Im Hayi B'soch Tchum Shelo Ki'ilu Lo Yatsa Mitoch Beis Sodami. Rabba says what it means is as follows, that if my new tchum overlaps with my old tchum, it's as if I never left my house. To which the Gemara says, Pshita. Okay, like what's the chiddush in that? Obviously, if my new tchum overlaps with my old tchum, then I can go back home. To which the Gemara says, Ma'adatema, Hoil va'akar akar. So you said the Havamin is like this. I might have thought that once I leave my home and I make a definitive decision that I'm heading to Yerushalayim, perhaps, again, when that happens, effectively, I lose my old tchum. Kevan da'aka akar means once I uprooted myself, and that old tchum is done. Kamash malonad. Kamash malonad say that halacha l'maisa, if my new tchum overlaps with my old tchum, I have the ability ultimately to what? To go back ultimately to my old tchum. All right, so we'll stop over here. We'll pick up a Miras Hashem with the continuation of this sugya tomorrow. Shkoyach.